Dr. Zixnax peered through his 6 compound eyes at the readout on the medical scanner, his antennae twitching in disbelief. He blinked rapidly, convinced his visual receptors must be malfunctioning. There was simply no way the data could be accurate. Impossible, he chittered, mandibles clicking together in agitation. Simply impossible. His assistant, a young Quilxian named Blorp. Yes, really, Blorp, his parents clearly hated him, slithered over on a trail of glistening mucus. What seems to be the problem, Doctor? He gurgled inquiringly. Dr. Zixnax gestured at the unconscious human female on the exam table with one of his spindly appendages. According to these readings, this Deathworlder should be deceased. Kaput. Shuffled off this mortal coil. Joined the choir invisible. An ex-human. Blorp peered at the scanner with his eye stalks. Oh my, that does look rather fatal, doesn't it? Ruptured organs, massive blood loss, multiple compound fractures. Are you quite certain she's not actually dead? The doctor pointed at the steadily beeping life signs monitor. Does that sound like a cadaver to you, you gelatinous nincompoop? I say, there's no need for name-calling, Blorp huffed indignantly, his body rippling in offense. Dr. Zixnax ignored him, continuing to mutter to himself. It defies all medical logic. By all rights, this human should be nothing more than an exceptionally leaky sack of meat by now. And yet he trailed off, mandibles working furiously as he tried to process the situation. Just then, the exam room door whooshed open, and in strode Dr. Krozicht, the hospital's chief of medicine. The mantis-like alien's exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lighting as he fixed Dr. Zixnax with a stern gaze from his bulbous eyes. What's all this then, he demanded. I was in the middle of a delightful meal of fermented algae when I received an urgent page. This had better be important, Zixnax, or I'll have you transferred to waste disposal duty faster than you can say explosive decompression. Dr. Zixnax hastily straightened up, nearly knocking over a tray of delicate instruments with his unwieldy limbs. Chief, so glad you're here. We have a rather unusual case on our appendages. Dr. Krozicht's antennae twitched irritably. Out with it, man. I haven't got all solar cycle. Well, you see, sir, it's this human patient. Female, approximately 30 standard years old, brought in with injuries that, by all medical knowledge, should be absolutely unequivocally fatal. And yet, he gestured helplessly at the steadily beeping life signs monitor. The chief of medicine's compound eyes narrowed as he examined the patient and reviewed the scans. After a long moment, he turned to fix Dr. Zixnax with an accusing glare. Is this some kind of juvenile prank, doctor? Because I assure you, I am not amused. No, Sir, Zixnax stammered. I swear on the Grand Hive Mother, everything here is completely factual. Dr. Krozicht's mandibles worked furiously as he processed this information. Finally, he spoke, his voice filled with reluctant fascination. Incredible. Simply incredible. In all my years of medical practice, I've never seen anything like it. This human's capacity for survival is, frankly, terrifying. Blorp, who had been quietly oozing in the corner, piped up. Begging your pardon, sirs, but I believe the human is regaining consciousness. All 3 aliens turned to stare as the woman on the exam table began to stir, her eyelids fluttering open. She blinked groggily, taking in the strange faces looming over her. Ooh, she groaned. Did anyone get the number of that asteroid that hit me? Dr. Zixnax leaned in, his antennae quivering with barely suppressed excitement. Greetings, human. I am Dr. Zixnax. How are you feeling? The woman considered for a moment, like I got into a fistfight with a black hole and lost. But honestly, I've had worse hangovers. She attempted to sit up, wincing slightly. So what's the damage, Doc? Anything serious? The 3 aliens exchanged incredulous looks. Dr. Krozicht cleared his throat, or whatever passed for a throat in his bizarre alien physiology. Ah, well, you see. By all medical knowledge you should be, how did the humans put it, dead as a doornail. The woman chuckled, then immediately regretted it as pain lanced through her ribs. Ouch. Okay, laughing hurts. Note to self, no comedy clubs for a while. But seriously, it can't be that bad, right? I mean, I'm still breathing and everything. Dr. Zixnax's mandibles clicked rapidly as he struggled to find the words to explain. You don't understand. Your injuries are catastrophic. Multiple organ failures, severe blood loss, compound fractures. It's a miracle you're even conscious, let alone talking. The human woman shrugged, then winced again. You should see the other guy. Actually, come to think of it, what exactly happened? Last thing I remember, I was at the spaceport on Rigel IV, minding my own business. Blorp slithered forward, his eye stalks wobbling excitedly. Oh, I can answer that. According to the report, you were caught in the middle of a terrorist attack. A Zorgak separatist group detonated a plasma bomb in the main concourse. You apparently shielded a group of alien children from the blast with your own body. The woman's eyes widened. Holy shit, really? That's pretty badass. Gomishi paused, a look of concern crossing her face. Wait, the kids, are they okay? Dr. Krozakti nodded, still looking utterly baffled by the human's nonchalant attitude. Yes, thanks to your actions, they survived with only minor injuries. You, on the other hand, took the brunt of a freaking plasma bomb. Apparently the woman finished for him. She grinned, despite the pain it clearly caused her. Well, that explains why I feel like I went 10 rounds with a supernova. So, what's the prognosis, docs? Am I gonna live? The three alien medical professionals exchanged helpless glances. Finally, Dr. Zixnax spoke up. Well, by all logic and medical science, no. You shouldn't even be alive now, let alone expect to recover. And yet, he gestured at the monitors, which continued to display stubbornly stable vital signs. The human woman rolled her eyes. Come on, I'm sure you're exaggerating. It's just a flesh wound. Nothing a few band-aids and some Advil can't fix, right? Dr. Krozik's skeleton practically vibrated with frustration. You don't understand, human. Your injuries are beyond severe. They're fatal. By all rights, you should be nothing more than a messy smear on the spaceport floor right now. The woman considered this for a moment, then shrugged again, followed by another wince. She really needed to stop doing that. Well, I guess I'm just too stubborn to die. Now, not that I don't appreciate the top-notch medical care and all, but any chance I could get some painkillers. I wasn't kidding about that supernova thing. As Blorp slithered off to fetch medication, Dr. Zixnax leaned in close, his compound eyes glittering with scientific curiosity. Fascinating, simply fascinating. Tell me, human, is this level of durability common among your species? The woman thought for a moment. I mean, we're pretty tough, I guess. Got that whole Deathworlder reputation and all, but I wouldn't say we're invincible or anything, although she grinned mischievously. I did once see a guy walk off a broken femur because he didn't want to miss the season finale of his favorite show. Dr. Krozik's antennae stood straight up in shock. Impossible. A broken femur is an extremely serious injury. The human nodded sagely. Oh yeah, totally. But you try getting between a human and the last episode of Game of Thrones. It's like trying to separate a Kzinti warrior from its favorite disemboweling knife. Blorp returned, carrying a hypospray filled with a bright purple liquid. Here you are, human, our strongest pain medication. I must warn you, it may cause some slight disorientation and... Before he could finish, the woman had snatched the hypospray and jabbed it into her own neck. The three aliens watched in horror as she depressed the plunger, injecting the full dose in one go. Ah, that's the stuff, she sighed contentedly, her eyes going slightly unfocused. You know, for a bunch of bug-eyed aliens, you guys aren't half bad. A little uptight maybe, but your drugs are top-notch. Dr. Zixnax's mandibles worked furiously. But that was enough sedative to knock out a fully grown Regelian swamp beast. How are you even still conscious? The woman giggled, a decidedly loopy grin spreading across her face. What can I say? Humans are full of surprises. Now, who wants to hear a joke? Why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. She dissolved into a fit of giggles, while the three alien doctors looked on in a mixture of horror and fascination. Dr. Krezek leaned in close to Dr. Zixnax, his voice a low hiss. I want a full battery of tests run on this human. Blood work, tissue samples, genetic analysis, the works. If we can harness even a fraction of their regenerative capabilities. Dr. Zixnax nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. I'll get right on it, although he glanced nervously at the human, who was now attempting to explain the concept of knock-knock-knocks jokes to an increasingly confused Blorp. Perhaps we should wait until the medication wears off. Dr. Krozek considered this, then nodded. Agreed. In the meantime, I want a full security detail posted outside this room. The last thing we need is for our miraculous human to wander off and cause an interstellar incident. As if on cue, the woman suddenly sat bolt upright, her eyes wide with excitement. Hey, you guys ever tried pizza? Because let me tell you, it's the best thing ever. We should totally order some. Ooh, or maybe tacos. Do you think they deliver to hospitals on alien planets? The three doctors exchanged weary glances. It was going to be a long night. Several hours later, after the pain medication had worn off and the human had been subjected to a battery of tests that would have made a lab rat file a formal complaint, Dr. Zixnax found himself once again staring at a set of medical readouts in utter disbelief. This is unprecedented, he muttered, his antennae twitching spasmodically. The rate of cellular regeneration, the enhanced immune response, the sheer resilience of their biology. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Thorpe, who had been assisting with the tests and was still trying to wrap his gelatinous brain around the concept of knock-knock jokes, gurgled inquisitively. But surely, Doctor, we've encountered species with impressive healing abilities before. The Lazaran mind worms, for instance, can regrow entire body segments. Dr. Zixnax waved a dismissive appendage. Bah! Child's play compared to this. The human's body isn't just healing, it's adapting. Look here, he pointed a spindly digit at a particularly complex graph. See how the cellular structure is changing. It's as if their body is learning from the injury, making itself more resistant to similar damage in the future. Fascinating, Blorp bubbled, his eye stalks wobbling with excitement. But what could have caused such an evolutionary advantage? The doctor's compound eyes gleamed with scientific fervor. Their homeworld, of course. Earth, a death world so horrifically dangerous that it boggles the mind. Gravity crushing enough to pulverize a thoraxian battle tank, atmospheric pressure that would implode the average sentient, temperature variations that swing from instantly freeze-dried to spontaneous combustion. And that's just the planet itself. He began to pace, gesticulating wildly with his numerous limbs. Then you have the flora and fauna plants that can digest entire creatures, animals that could swallow a Glesian war barge whole. Microscopic organisms so virulent they make the Andromeda plague look like a mild case of the sniffles. Is it any wonder that a species evolving in such a nightmarish environment would develop such incredible survival traits? Blorp quivered thoughtfully, leaving a trail of luminescent slime in his wake. When you put it like that, it's a miracle the humans haven't conquered the entire galaxy yet. Dr. Zixnax froze mid-gesture, his exoskeleton paling visibly. By the Grand Hive Mother, what if that's their plan? What if this injured human is just the first wave of an invasion force? Before Blorp could respond, probably with something unhelpful and mucus-related, the door to the lab whooshed open, revealing their human patient. She was on her feet, looking remarkably chipper for someone who, by all medical logic, should have been occupying a drawer in the hospital morgue. "Hey, docs," she called out cheerfully. "Don't suppose either of you fine gentle beings could point me towards the cafeteria. I'm absolutely starving. Turns out nearly dying really works up an appetite." Dr. Zixnax's mandibles worked soundlessly for a moment before he found his voice. You shouldn't be out of bed. Your injuries." The woman waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, please, I'm fine. A little sore maybe, but nothing a good meal won't fix. Now, about that cafeteria." Blorp, ever helpful and apparently immune to the concept of potential alien invasion, bubbled excitedly. "Oh, I know where it is. I'd be happy to show you, human." "Blorp, no," Dr. Zixnax hissed. "We can't just let her wander around the hospital. She needs to be under observation and—" But it was too late. The human had already linked arms with Blorp, or at least the closest approximation given the Quilxian's amorphous physiology, and was heading for the door. "Thanks, Blorpy. You're a real pal. Hey, you ever tried ice cream? Because let me tell you, it'll change your life." As their voices faded down the corridor, Dr. Zixnax slumped against his workstation, all 6 of his legs suddenly feeling very weak. "What have I done?" he moaned. "I've unleashed an indestructible Deathworlder on an unsuspecting hospital. The chief is going to molt me alive." With a resigned sigh, he straightened up and headed for the door. Someone had to make sure the human didn't accidentally conquer the hospital while looking for dessert. Meanwhile, in the hospital cafeteria, chaos reigned supreme. The human woman, who had finally introduced herself as Jessica, but you can call me Jess, or that crazy human who survived a plasma bomb, whichever's easier, was holding court at a table surrounded by a diverse array of alien life forms. Some were patients, others were staff members who had abandoned their posts out of sheer curiosity. All of them were utterly enthralled by the Deathworlder in their midst. And that's why you should never try to arm wrestle a octopus, Jess was saying, gesticulating wildly with a spork in one hand, and what appeared to be a gelatinous blob masquerading as food in the other. 8 arms, you know. Total cheaters. A chorus of chittering, gurgling, and various other alien approximations of laughter rippled through the crowd. Blorp, who had appointed himself Jess's unofficial translator and cultural attaché, was practically vibrating with excitement. Oh, he bubbled, his eye stalks wobbling enthusiastically. Tell them about the roller coasters you mentioned earlier. The very concept of voluntary terror as entertainment is utterly fascinating to non-Deathworlders. Jess grinned, a mischievous glint in her eye. All right, picture this: a thin metal track, twisting and looping hundreds of feet in the air. Now imagine a small cart, filled with screaming humans, hurtling along this track at speeds that would make your average spaceship pilot green with envy. Up, down, upside down, corkscrews, loop-de-loops, all while your body is subjected to forces that would turn most species into a fine paste. The assembled aliens listened in horrified fascination, many of them turning interesting shades that probably indicated extreme nausea in their respective species. And humans do this. For fun, asked a spindly, multi-limbed being that looked like a sentient pipe cleaner. Jess nodded enthusiastically. Oh yeah, the bigger, faster and scarier, the better. We even rate them on how likely they are to make you lose your lunch. It's great. A collective shudder ran through the crowd. Blorp, ever curious, oozed closer. But surely such dangerous activities are restricted to only the bravest and most physically fit of your species. Jess snorted, nearly choking on her supposedly edible gelatinous blob. Ha, nope, we let kids ride 'em. Well, as long as they're tall enough. Gotta have some standards, you know. This revelation was met with a cacophony of shocked exclamations in at least a dozen different languages. Jess grinned, clearly enjoying the reaction. Oh, if you think that's wild, wait till I tell you about skydiving, or maybe bungee jumping, or ultramarathons. You guys are gonna love this. Just then, Dr. Zix-Nax burst into the cafeteria, all 6 of his eyes wide with panic. He'd been searching the hospital for the better part of an hour, growing increasingly convinced that the indestructible human had either taken over the facility or inadvertently destroyed it. There you are, he chittered, mandibles clicking rapidly in agitation. What do you think you're doing? You should be resting, recovering, not. He gestured helplessly at the scene before him. Jess waved cheerfully. Hey doc, pull up a chair. I was just about to explain the ancient human art of parkour to these fine folks. Dr. Zix-Nax's antennae drooped in defeat. I don't suppose there's any chance you'll willingly return to your room for further observation and testing. The human pretended to consider this for a moment. Ishem, tempting offer. Counter-proposal, how about you grab some of this delicious? That she poked at the gelatinous blob on her plate, which jiggled ominously, food-adjacent substance, and join us. I promise, it'll be way more fun than poking me with needles and looking perplexed at your scanners. Before the doctor could respond, a new voice cut through the cafeteria chatter. What in the name of the Galactic Council is going on here? All eyes and various other sensory organs turned to see Dr. Krozakt, Chief of Medicine, standing in the doorway. His exoskeleton was practically vibrating with barely contained fury. Ah, hell, Jess muttered. Looks like the fun police have arrived. Dr. Krozakt stalked over, his multiple legs clicking ominously against the floor. Dr. Zix-Nax, I tasked you with observing and studying our guest. Instead, I find half my staff derelict in their duties, gathered around her like she's the most fascinating thing they've ever seen. Blorp offered helpfully, earning him a glare that could have curdled milk on a dozen different planets. Precisely, Dr. Krozakt hissed. This is a medical facility, not a circus. I want everyone back to their posts immediately, and as for you. He turned to Jess. You are returning to your room this instant for a full examination. We need to understand how you've recovered so quickly from injuries that should have been, by all accounts, fatal. Jess sighed dramatically. Fine. But only if you answer one question for me first. Dr. Krozakt's antennae twitched in annoyance. And what, pray tell, would that be? A mischievous grin spread across the human's face. Do you have any idea how much paperwork is involved in declaring someone legally dead when they're, not actually dead? Because I've got a feeling there's going to be a lot of confused bureaucrats back home when word of this gets out. The chief of medicine's compound eyes blinked rapidly as he processed this. That is, it's hardly relevant to. Oh, it's plenty relevant, Jess interrupted, her grin widening. Because I'm thinking, if you really want to understand how I survived, you're going to need to study humans in general. And what better way to do that than a cultural exchange program? I'm sure plenty of folks back on Earth would love to visit an alien hospital. For science, of course. Dr. Krozek's mandibles worked soundlessly for a moment as he imagined the chaos that would ensue from a hospital full of Deathworlders. That's completely out of the question. The liability alone would be. But think of the potential medical advances, Jess pressed, warming to her theme. Imagine being able to apply human-level durability to other species. You'd revolutionize trauma care across the galaxy, not to mention the marketing potential. Galactic general home of the unkillable humans. Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? The assembled aliens watched this verbal sparring match with rapt attention, heads swiveling back and forth as if watching a particularly intense game of zero-G tennis. Dr. Krozek's exoskeleton had taken on a distinctly paler hue. This is absurd. I won't be manipulated by a patient, even one as uniquely resilient as yourself. You will return to your room immediately for further testing, and that's final. Jess shrugged, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at her still healing injuries. All right, you win. Back to the room it is. But don't say I didn't warn you when the intergalactic media gets wind of this. I can see the headlines now: miracle human survival covered up by stuffy alien doctors. It'll be a scandal. Dr. Krozek's antennae drooped in defeat. Fine, Will. Consider your proposal for a cultural exchange. But first you are going back to your room, and you are going to submit to every test we can devise. Is that understood? Jess saluted sloppily, nearly poking herself in the eye. Aye, Captain Buggy. Lead the way to your torture chambers, your state-of-the-art medical facilities. As Dr. Zixnax began herding the human back towards her room, Blorp oozed up beside Dr. Kruzgt. I must say, sir, I think this could be a wonderful opportunity for interspecies cooperation and understanding. Dr. Kruzgt fixed the enthusiastic Quilxian with a baleful glare. Blorp, if you don't return to your duties this instant, I'll have you assigned to clean the waste recycling units for the next solar cycle. With your tongue. As Blorp hastily slithered away, leaving a trail of anxious slime in his wake, Dr. Krozek turned to survey the now empty cafeteria. He had a sinking feeling that his orderly, logical little corner of the galaxy was about to become a whole lot more human. What have I gotten myself into, he muttered, his mandibles clicking in resignation. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of Galactic General's adventures with their new human guests. The galaxy would never be the same again. Epilogue. 6 standard months later, Galactic General had become the most famous or infamous, depending on who you asked, medical facility in the known universe. The Human Cultural Exchange Program, despite Dr. Krozek's initial reservations, had been an unprecedented success. Oh sure, there had been a few incidents. Like the time a group of human extreme sports enthusiasts had attempted to turn the hospital's zero-G therapy chamber into what they called a radical space half-pipe. Or the great caffeine incident of 42, which had resulted in 3 new wings being added to the hospital and a galaxy-wide ban on importing Earth coffee. But the medical advancements had been nothing short of miraculous. Dr. Zixnax had published no fewer than 12 papers on human cellular regeneration, earning himself the coveted Galactic Science Academy's most likely to accidentally create a superhero award. Blorp had become the hospital's official human cultural liaison, a job that mostly involved explaining why humans could not actually breathe fire or shoot lasers from their eyes, despite what the latest holodrama might suggest. As for Jess, well, she'd parlayed her newfound fame as the unkillable human into a lucrative career as a motivational speaker. Her catchphrase, "If I can survive a plasma bomb, you can survive that job interview," had become a galaxy-wide sensation. And Dr. Kruzgate. He'd finally given up trying to maintain order in the chaos that was Galactic General's new human ward. These days he could often be found in the hospital's New Earth room, sipping something called a pina colada and muttering about early retirement. As for the rest of the galaxy, well, they were slowly coming to terms with the fact that humans were here to stay. Deathworlders they might be, but they were also innovative, resilient, and possessed of a zest for life that was, quite frankly, terrifying. As the future of galactic medicine had never looked brighter, or more accident-prone. But hey, that's what happens when you let humans into your hospital. At least things were never boring.